I had been with the company for nearly 2 decades, through ups and downs, mergers and market crashes. I was loyal, consistent, and respected. But the day my brother-in-law took over as CEO, everything changed. He walked into the boardroom like a man on a mission. "We're heading in a new direction," he said, barely looking at me. "Your role is no longer needed." The room fell silent. I stood up slowly, looked him dead in the eyes, and said just one sentence that made even the CFO drop his pen. I had always known that family and business could be a dangerous mix. Still, I never thought it would come to this. When my wife's younger brother, Adam, was announced as the new CEO of Delta Core Industries, it sent ripples through the office. He had the charm, the MBA, and a flashy resume that dazzled the board. But experience? That was thin. Most of his career had been built in startups, not in a corporate environment where loyalty, systems, and legacy mattered. I had been with Delta Core for 18 years, almost from its founding days, when our offices were a single floor in a shared building, and we had to fight for every client. I wasn't just an employee. I was the memory of the company. But Adam didn't see that. Or worse, he did, and that's exactly why he wanted me gone. The tension had been building ever since he walked in with his tailored suit and Silicon Valley energy. On his first day, he called for a full departmental audit. He didn't ask anyone about legacy operations or how we retained long-term clients. He just brought in his own team of analysts and started cutting costs. I voiced concerns, respectfully, professionally. But each time I did, I noticed him stiffen just slightly. Then the meetings stopped, including me. Emails dried up. Eventually, even my assistant began whispering that something didn't feel right. Still, I wasn't prepared for the morning it happened. The all-hands meeting was called at 10 a.m., and I arrived early, curious about the sudden urgency. The entire executive team was there. Adam stood at the front, flanked by the HR director and a few unfamiliar faces I assumed were consultants. He opened with that same bright smile and began talking about streamlining operations and fresh leadership direction. I kept nodding along until he turned toward me. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed, "as part of this transition, we've decided to dissolve the strategic partnerships role you've been leading. Effective immediately, your position is terminated." For a few seconds, I thought I'd misheard. I scanned the room. Eyes dropped. Some were wide in disbelief, others glued to their notes. Not one person made eye contact. I stood slowly, keeping my voice steady even though my chest tightened. "After 18 years?" I asked. "No meeting? No conversation?" Adam kept his tone neutral. "It's not personal. This is about progress." Progress. That word stung more than anything else. I'd poured everything into this company, worked weekends, lost anniversaries, missed vacations. And now I was being erased by a man who'd never stepped foot in the trenches with us. I nodded. "Very well." But just before I turned to leave, I paused. I looked at Adam, then the room, and said, "Let me leave you with this: some people bring innovation. Others bring memory. Without both, progress becomes chaos." Then I walked out, leaving the silence heavy behind me. In the days that followed, I expected to feel anger. Or betrayal. Instead, I felt calm. But because deep down, I knew something Adam didn't: the clients. Over nearly 2 decades, I had built personal relationships with key accounts, often acting more as a partner than a vendor. I'd helped some of them survive downturns, had dinner with their families, and advised them beyond the scope of business. I didn't just handle contracts, I handled trust. 3 days after I was let go, I received a call from Simon Draper, CEO of Coretrans, one of our largest clients. "Ethan, we just got a new rep assigned to us. Some guy from Chicago who barely understands our industry," he said, frustrated. "Where the hell did you go?" I explained. He was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "This is madness. You were the reason we stayed with Delta Core." The next week, another client called. Then another. Soon, I was spending my days fielding calls, emails, even LinkedIn messages from people who all had the same concern: they didn't trust the new team. They didn't know the new reps, they wanted to know where I was going next. It was tempting to jump into consulting right away, but I was cautious. I didn't want this to be revenge. I wanted it to be right. So, I took meetings, listened, and eventually began structuring a new venture, a boutique consulting firm that would focus on deep client relationships, not just data dashboards and slide decks. Meanwhile, rumors from inside Delta Core began trickling out. Morale was plummeting. Client renewals were down. Adam's flashy plans were hitting walls he didn't even know existed. Strategic partners weren't streamlining. They were unraveling. Then came the email from the board itself. It was subtle, a request for a private coffee meeting to hear your thoughts. I knew the tide was shifting. But I wasn't sure yet whether I wanted to go back or let it all fall. The coffee meeting with the board wasn't in the office, it was at a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking the skyline. The kind of setting you choose when you want conversations to stay private. I arrived a few minutes early, sipping my espresso slowly as I watched the sun bounce off the high rises. Then, one by one, 3 board members arrived. Margaret, the longest-serving member, gave me a curt nod. David, who'd always appreciated my strategic insight, looked uncomfortable. And then there was Rana, the newest addition, brilliant, pragmatic, and always sharply dressed. They greeted me politely, but the air between us was thick with tension. Margaret leaned forward. "Ethan, we'll get straight to it. We've been getting calls. A lot of them. High-profile clients asking about you, or worse, threatening to walk if they can't work with you directly." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. David chimed in, "You've built something here that none of us truly accounted for, relationship capital. And now that you're gone, we're seeing just how crucial that is." I shrugged. I warned Adam. He believed tech could replace trust. But people don't sign contracts with a dashboard, they sign with someone they believe in. Rana sipped her tea and set it down deliberately. "Would you consider coming back? In a consulting capacity at least?" I stared at her for a moment, and then quietly said, "No." Their surprise was visible. Margaret leaned back, arms folded. "Why not?" I looked at each of them. Because the culture has shifted. When a CEO can walk in and erase legacy without understanding its foundation, the structure is already cracked. I'd be stepping back into a house that's collapsing. There was a long pause. Then Rana asked the question that changed everything. "What would it take to fix it?" That's when I knew they weren't just trying to plug a leak, they were looking to rebuild. I took a breath and replied, "You don't just need me. You need a new approach. You need to stop mistaking new for better and remember that what built this company was consistency, not flash. You need people who know your clients, not just their industries, but their anxieties, their goals, and their long-term visions." Margaret spoke next, slowly. "We think you should come back. Not as what you were, but higher. Chief Client Strategist. A board-level seat. Full autonomy to build out the new relationship division." I hesitated. "And Adam?" David looked down, choosing his words carefully. "He's been under review. performance, cultural leadership, strategic missteps. This last quarter has been rough. The board is considering a leadership restructure. I knew what that meant. Part of me wanted to say yes right away. Part of me wanted to gloat. To rub it in that the brother-in-law who once fired me in front of a room full of silent executives was now on the verge of being pushed out by the very people who once cheered his arrival. But another part of me, a deeper, more grounded part, wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for respect. I told them I'd consider it, but I needed time. I didn't mention the firm I was building quietly behind the scenes. The one already signed with 3 of Deltacor's biggest ex-clients. Later that week, I received a phone call from Adam. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I picked up. "Ethan," he said, his voice tight, "I heard about the meeting." "I figured you would." He was silent for a beat. "I didn't expect this fallout." "No," I said calmly. "You didn't. Because you thought a company runs on spreadsheets and projections. But you forgot the one thing every business needs: people." He sighed. "Look, I know you're angry." "I'm not," I cut in. "Not anymore. You did what you thought was right. But your mistake wasn't firing me, it was underestimating everything I built." There was another long pause. "If you come back, I won't stand in the way." That said more than he probably realized. By the end of the month, the announcement was made: Adam was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. Internally, it was an open secret he had been asked to resign. The official story was wrapped in corporate PR fluff, but the staff saw through it. And when my return was announced, along with my elevated role and direct reporting line to the board, there was a subtle shift. Employees began to speak more openly again. Long-term clients re-engaged. A few even emailed directly to say, "Thank God you're back." But the most telling moment came when I walked into the same conference room where I'd been fired just months earlier. The room looked the same, but this time, the respect was unmistakable. I didn't use the moment to shame anyone. I simply laid out my new vision: a company that values innovation and loyalty, data and relationships, efficiency and empathy. Some people looked stunned. Others looked relieved. And as I walked out, I passed Adam's old office, now empty. His name had already been removed from the door. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded to myself. My official return was met with a strange blend of excitement, caution, and silent anticipation. The staff, many of whom had quietly supported me in the shadows, started to open up again. The office felt more alive, more connected. The unspoken fear that had hung over everyone like a cloud during Adam's short reign had started to lift. On my first official day back, I didn't take the big corner office they offered. I chose a glass-walled room near the middle of the floor, more visible, more accessible. I didn't want to recreate the hierarchy that had made people retreat. I wanted presence and trust to be the new foundation. I spent the next 2 weeks holding roundtables with teams from every department: marketing, analytics, client relations, operations. I didn't talk much during these sessions. I listened. What I heard was a pattern of fear, insecurity, and confusion that had spread under Adam's rule. He had created a culture of silencing voices instead of empowering them. No wonder innovation had stalled, and the best people had started looking elsewhere. I began making changes, but carefully. It wasn't just about reversing Adam's decisions. Some of what he tried to implement had merit, it was just rushed, tone-deaf, and disconnected. So I took what worked, rebuilt what had been broken, and, most importantly, gave people a voice again. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a quarterly client feedback report, my assistant knocked lightly and stepped in. There's someone here to see you, she said with a slight hesitation. It's Adam. I looked up slowly. Send him in. Adam walked in with the stiffness of someone who wasn't sure if he should be there. He looked smaller somehow, less polished than the day he fired me. He didn't sit until I nodded. I won't take much of your time, he started. I heard what's been happening. The staff, the clients. Everyone seems relieved. I waited, letting the silence draw him out. I wanted to say I was wrong, he continued. About you. About how I handled everything. I studied his face. There was no arrogance left. Only discomfort and a flicker of remorse. I didn't understand what made the company work, he said. I thought vision alone was enough. I thought I could replace decades of relationships with systems. And what changed your mind? I asked evenly. He gave a sad chuckle. I started getting LinkedIn notifications. Dozens of them. Clients leaving. Staff members updating their resumes. Some even messaged me directly. One of them said, "You killed the heart of this company." That stuck with me. I leaned back. People don't follow a title. They follow trust. That's what you never understood. He nodded slowly. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say it. I owe you that. There was a moment of quiet, and for the first time since that boardroom ambush, I saw the man, not the title. And he was no longer a threat. Just a man who had misjudged a family member, a legacy, and an entire company. Thank you for saying that, I said. I hope you find your own place to rebuild. Away from legacy. On your own terms. He gave a faint smile, nodded, and left. That night, I stayed late reviewing the next quarter's growth plan. Our client retention was back over 92%. New contracts were in motion. And most importantly, the energy in the office had shifted back to what it once was: collaborative, driven, unified. As I walked the quiet halls before heading out, I passed by the break room. Inside, I saw several team leads huddled around, laughing over something on a laptop. They didn't see me. But I saw them, smiling, energized, engaged. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about what we were rebuilding together. That weekend, at a family gathering, one I hadn't expected to attend, I ran into Adam again. This time, he was subdued but genuine. We spoke briefly, exchanging small talk. My wife, his sister, gave me a subtle look that said, "You handled this better than anyone expected." Her eyes held a quiet pride. As we were leaving, Adam pulled me aside and said, "I hope, someday, I can earn back some of the respect I lost." I didn't answer with words. I just shook his hand and nodded. Over the following months, the board began a new initiative, one I had quietly proposed. We called it the People First Directive. It emphasized long-term relationship building, cross-department transparency, and leadership accountability. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. And it started working. Revenues grew, yes. But more importantly, people stopped leaving. Staff retention soared. Clients stayed. And for the first time in years, the company felt alive again. One morning, Margaret, the board veteran, called me. "I wasn't sure about you at first," she admitted, "but I've never been more certain that we made the right decision. You didn't just rebuild the company. You recalibrated its soul." That stayed with me. In one of the final pieces of restructuring, the company decided to permanently retire Adam's CEO title and instead shift to a more distributed executive model, where decisions weren't centralized but shared across a leadership council. I helped design that model, even though it meant reducing my own centralized authority. Because power wasn't what mattered to me anymore. Legacy was. By the end of that fiscal year, Deltacore had become a case study in resilience. Business magazines wrote stories titled, "Fired, Then Elevated, the Man Who Turned Quiet Loyalty into Loud Impact." But for me, the greatest moment was quieter, when a young analyst stopped me in the hallway one day and said, "You made me believe in leadership again." That's when I knew, my comeback wasn't just about proving Adam wrong. It was about proving everyone else right. And we weren't done yet. In the end, the story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving I was right. It became something deeper, about rediscovering what truly mattered to me. When Adam fired me, he didn't just push me out of a job. He forced me to reevaluate who I was without a title, without a desk, without daily meetings and deadlines. And what I found was that I wasn't defined by my position, I was defined by the people who believed in me, and by the years I had poured into something that mattered. The company had changed, but so had I. I wasn't the same quiet, loyal executive I'd been for 22 years. I'd learned to speak up, to push back when necessary, to claim space that I had quietly earned over decades. More importantly, I learned to lead with purpose, not ego. Adam's downfall wasn't just about incompetence. It was about misunderstanding what leadership really means. He saw control as strength, and decisions as dominance. But real leadership? It's listening when others are silent. It's standing up when everyone else is afraid. It's making space for others, not just yourself. People eventually forgot the drama of the boardroom. They forgot the cold email that removed my access, the shock of my firing, and even the headline-worthy turnaround. But they remembered how the company felt after the storm passed. They remembered the calm after chaos, the structure, the kindness, the collaboration. That became the legacy I was proud to leave. At family gatherings, things were quieter now. Respectful. Cautious, yes, but no longer filled with unspoken tension. Adam never returned to the company, but he did start something new, something of his own. And from what I've heard, he's doing it differently this time. As for me, I'm not chasing titles anymore. I'm building something that outlives positions, trust, legacy, and belief. Because sometimes, when you're stripped of everything, what remains is what truly defines you. And I've never been more certain of who I am.